Hello and welcome to Recovery Weekly, an interactive weekly program used to guide you, the family member of an individual with a substance abuse problem, through the process of recovery. I'm your host, Scott Kaling, joined as always by my co-host, Ian Koch. Ian is a licensed drug and alcohol counselor, as well as an internationally certified addiction specialist for NortheastAddictionConsultants.com. And welcome to the show, Ian.
Thanks, Scott.
I'd like to introduce the audience, Joe Riley, the founder of Skip Murphy's Sober House, a sober living house located at 32 Deering Avenue in Portland, Maine. Welcome to the show. And
thanks, Scott. Thanks, Ian.
No problem, Joe. Ian said he had a couple announcements he would like to make before we started the show, so go ahead, Ian.
I do. I first want to let everyone know that we have Northeast Addiction Consultants has hired Shai King as our addiction resource consultant. You can check out our About Us page on the web and see her credentials. She's an amazing woman, completely dedicated to recovery in every facet of her life. She brings some counseling background and some really good resource background as well to be able to help out some families. And she's also going to do some counseling for us as well. Also want to say Happy Father's Day to any fathers out there who are watching. I know I called my father this morning, and he's out in his favorite place, which is the garden, playing with the vegetables out there. So hopefully he's enjoying his day, and all the other fathers. It can get, if you're a father who's struggling right now, it can get better. I was actually expelled from school on my father's birthday at one point, and he had to come and get me. And another time I was arrested on Mother's Day. So it can get better. Right now it might look pretty grim and you might want to kill your kid, but in time, ideally, things will change. So happy Father's Day, everyone. And yeah, Scott, go ahead.
Let's get on with the show, right? All right, so Joe, I read on your website at skipmurphys.com that you first discovered your passion for helping others after you yourself became sober. Can you explain a little how that was the case?
Yes. Well, Scott, I suffered with the disease of alcoholism and addiction for 10 plus years anyway. And my experience was kind of just bouncing in and bouncing out of different facilities, whether it be a detox, a holding facility, a halfway house, a sober house, an IOP, a counselor's office, you name it. And I couldn't really put together any length of sobriety, and anything more than 6, maybe 7, 8 months. And what had happened was, along the way, I hurt a lot of people. I did a lot of damage. And when I was finally introduced to working the program, from a group of people, as I was going through that experience, as I was going through the 12-step process, something had shifted within me. And, I was beginning to change at a cellular level almost, these ideas, who I thought I was, how I fit in the world, and basically who I thought I was, begin to change. And I was just open to a whole new set of ideas. Basically, in short, it became less about me, what I could get from you, and slowly, this was a process. This wasn't an overnight thing. But it became more about you or your brother, and how I can use my experience of being a knucklehead the last 10, 15 years, how I can use that experience to help you, or help your family, or help your brother. And I found that it was almost like not like an art form, but I felt like I was pretty decent at it. I felt it was like a new skill that I never knew I had. And just for instance, I was a conniver out there. I was a Weasley little type of guy. And, people would always tell me, Joe, my father would always tell me, Joseph, if you could just harness this energy, the energy that you put into your drugs and alcohol and the scheming and all that into something positive, the sky's the limit. And, you know, I never believed that. I never, you know, because I was always trying to fill his shoes, you know, always trying to match up to him, and I always fell short. So, you know, as I was getting better, you know, things just started changing. And, you know, I was a tradesman, you know, that's what I did for work. And I was in the local unions in Boston, and I did a lot of construction. And, you know, going through the 12 steps, it was like, that's not what I want to do. I don't think that's what I'm here for. You know, I used to ask my father that, you know, on the rides to detoxes or when I was expelled from school. You know, what am I here for, Dad? What am I here for? I know why you're here. You know, you got a degree, you do this, this, and that. And then there's me, you know, I'm kicked out of school. I need a ride to detox. I'm getting arrested. I'm going to court in some other county. You know, what am I here for? And it became clear why I was here as I was going through the 12-step process. And it was just like it says in Alcoholics Anonymous. My primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. And I try to do that in a fashion where I may help the family, I may help the community, I may help the client, I may help my family, you know? And so that's kind of how that whole thing was born. You know, a lot of my experiences in the last 5 years and a lot of the principles that I've learned in Alcoholics Anonymous or in the 12 steps, I've applied to my business because they just seem to be principles that if, you know, followed and guided by, that they'll remain intact for, you know, a long period of time. And we're not going to self-destruct as long as I'm doing things run on principles, you know? And so that's what we strive for. And that's kind of like what I strive for. You know, I apply those principles into my daily life, I try to do it into my relationship. I try to do it into work. I try to do the best I can. And, you know, that's basically how that whole heart was born. If that makes any sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you for the thorough answer. It's perfect. Before we continue on, I'd like to just mention this is an interactive show, and if you have any questions for Joe or Ian about recovery, please feel to enter them into the chat box to the right of the screen. Now, Joe, for those who aren't already aware, what is sober living?
Well, Scott, sober living is the act of living without chemicals.
Mm-hmm.
Just kidding.
Perfect.
No, sober living is basically, it's a facility that, you know, that one can go to after primary treatment. It's usually some form of therapeutic community where guys will live together with the sole purpose of rebuilding their lives, so to speak. Now, my experience with sober living has been, you know, kind of here and there, because when I started to attend sober living, it was basically a big house, and it was like a boarding house. It was like you paid $110 a week or $100 a week, and you stayed sober, and everything was cool. That's really the way sober living has kind of evolved. It's not like that really anymore. Well, up here in Portland, Maine, it's not anyway, and certainly not at Skip Murphy's. Basically now, sober living is where, you know, they have groups. You know, it's not just about paying you $100 a week and staying sober. It's about, you know, getting a sponsor, getting a job, rebuilding your resume, you know, getting cleaned up there, you know, going out and making amends, you know, just going back to school, doing different things like that, and just, you know, getting your life back, you know. And it's done in an environment where everybody is there for the primary purpose, you know. So, yeah, basically, it's therapeutic environment, you know. They're usually non-licensed facilities, you know, and they're with the common goal to achieve sobriety and rebuild the lives. You know, it's kind of like an interim from primary treatment before independent living, you know, and it's a good experience if people use it wisely, because they build great relationships in that time and usually take those relationships into their independent living.
See. Now, for those who heard what you just said now and decide that they're ready for this type of thing, they've gone through a treatment program, they're having a really hard time out there. What do you require of individuals who want to come to Skip Murphy's sober home?
Well, the first thing I require is a screening. They go through the screening process, and I have to be honest with you. When I do my screenings, I try to screen clients out. All right, I don't really necessarily want to scare them, but I want to let them know the truth of the matter, how it is coming into Skip Murphy's, and I want to make sure that these guys are ready to, take action, and they're ready to follow a strict set of rules, and they're hopefully ready to put, some of their old ideas off to the side and come into the sober living facility and just be open to a whole new experience. It goes so much further than just not drinking. And so that's what I try to let these guys know before they come in, or their families, because a lot of time the families will call me and say, they'll just Google sober house and say, oh, this is where I need my son to go. And I'm like, whoa, hold the horses here, Mom. If I just took everybody that just needed sober living, the place wouldn't be as special as it is. Okay. And so, I try to say, listen, when you come here, or when your son comes here, this is what's expected: A, B, C, D, and E. And most of the time they're like, oh, wow, I didn't know this is like a halfway house. And it's really not like a halfway house. I mean, we don't have a bunch of clinicians, on staff, but we incorporate a lot of that clinical treatment into sober living. So, yeah, I hope I didn't get too off topic with that.
No, you must have to also worry about the men you already have staying there too, and some outside influence that has really no, impetus to keep going through sobriety. Like you must have to worry about that as well.
I do, and I say it all the time. We serve the clients and their families. And I'm obligated to the families is to make sure I keep an environment that's conducive to recovery. So, if I got 12 guys or 13 guys in a facility, and I got 4 guys that are really not buying into the program, that are really not working their program, that are really not interested in recovery, but they're, they have to be in a sober house because Mom won't let them come home. That's not appropriate for them to come to my house. You know what I mean? So things like that, I'll try to screen out. I want guys that want to be there. I want not necessarily just that need to be there. There's a lot of people that need sober living, but it's just not appropriate for them to come to my house. You know what I mean? I want them to want to be there. And by doing that, it keeps the energy of the house. These guys are on fire. These guys can go from the second floor to the first floor and have a question. Hey, I got a question about inventory, or what about this? Or what about, if you're working with an alcoholic and this person does this, what do you think? And it's cool because the message that we have, because everybody is kind of, working the same program, is consistent, and the principles and the rules are all consistent, and the expectations of how people are living, Mm-hmm. We don't, a guy comes in and wants to start dating a girl in another sober house, and, we don't co-sign that stuff. And neither do the guys that are in my house. They'll let them know, like, dude, that's relapse behavior. Like, you're going to get sick around that stuff, And you might want to write some inventory. You might want to talk to Joe about that. You might want to put that off until you leave the house or something. You know what I mean? And so I'm obligated to keep the house as a whole operating as, drama-free as possible. And, sometimes that's not forming itself.
It's true. And now, once you do accept someone into the home and is there special requirements as far as getting a sponsor, doing the steps? Like, how far are you expecting to get through the steps? Things like that.
Okay, so if someone calls me up and they want to come into the house and they have, they've just got out of primary treatment in some other state or wherever, basically when they come to the house, and this is all said during the screening process, is we're going to hook those guys up with a sponsor. We're not going to allow him to just go into the community and get anybody that's, 2 or 3 years sober or longer and have that person call him a sponsor and, sit down and have coffee once every 2 weeks or buy him cigarettes or pick him up to go to meetings. What we do is we hook him up with somebody that's qualified, somebody that has the time, and somebody that has the willingness to get this new young man connected spiritually fast. And so what we'll do is the guy will come into the house, all right? The first 24, 48 hours is he makes contact with the guys that we give him the phone numbers. We usually give him 2 or 3 phone numbers. And I say, I want you to have coffee with these 3 guys. You're going to be going through the steps with one of them, and we want to see who you feel connected to. More often than not, it's usually the first or second person they get connected. I'd say the next week they're in big book groups, going through the big book, and at the end of the week they usually take a 3rd step, and then right into writing their 4th step. And as they do that, we send them down to the Portland Recovery Center. We send them down to the library. We send them down to the job career. We send them to an area that's conducive to do the spiritual exercise of what is called the 4th step. And so they'll do that. And that may take anywhere from 2 weeks to 45 days to write an inventory, depending on how long it is. They're to be out of the house from 9:30 in the morning till 3:30 in the morning writing inventory. Most guys didn't write inventory from 9:30 to 3:30, but that's our expectation. We hope, because here's the thing is, they're not really allowed to look for work until they've got the 5th step done. If we let guys come into the house and just go get a job and then attend a meeting every night and then attend counseling with me once a week and then go to a group in the house once a week and then meet their sponsor, guess what? The steps will take a back seat. And we recover, and this is my own stuff, but I believe we recover by the steps we take, not the meetings we make. So the primary focus is on the 12 steps. So when guys come in, I let them know that, listen, the first things first is we're going to hook you up with a sponsor. You're going to go through the 12 steps with them, all right? And you're going to get your 5th step before you're even able to go out into the community, look for work. And then when that time comes, you need to secure a job within 30, 45, 60 days of that. Are you open to that? And they may say yes, they may say no. And that's all done during the screening process. We want to be very transparent. We want to make sure it's a good fit, and we want to make sure that this guy is willing to do things the way we do them, because of the consistency in the message. Not because we think we know better, just because we're doing things out of the big book, which, is a proven, it's got a great track record. It followed concisely, and so why try to alter that, And that's the liberating part about being an unlicensed facility. Basically, we do everything right out of the big book, There's a lot of freedom in that,
Absolutely.
And it's still really great work.
Mm-hmm. And now in the case of, one of your men having an in-house relapse, what steps are taken?
Well, usually I'll get a phone call, maybe from the manager, maybe from another resident. Hey, Joe, you want to come over here? So-and-so looks funny. Or we do a random drug test and somebody tests positive. Usually sit down in my office and I just say, what do you want to do? Where are you at with this? Some guys are like, I'm going upstairs, packing my bags, and I'm having my friend pick me up. And that's fine. some of them, put their head in their hands and start to cry and say, I don't know what I did. I made a mistake. And, and the shame and the remorse is kind of just comes over them. And I said, well, okay, what do you want to do? And then usually what we'll do is I'll assess, what they were doing at the house, what they were doing leading up to that relapse. And that'll kind of give me an idea of how to refer them out. Does this guy need a higher level of care? Or does he just need to, work a better program? Because, he may have been skating by. Maybe he was just doing the requirements of the house just so he could say he was doing them. But really, in his heart of hearts, he wasn't buying into the program. So then I necessarily wouldn't refer him back to a higher level of care. I'd try to do like a lateral move, maybe into another sober house, where he can get hooked up with his sponsor, get honest about some stuff where he may have been being dishonest, or maybe where he was cutting corners, or where he was getting spiritually and mentally sick that, preceded the relapse, and try to pick up with his sponsor and go on from there. Or sometimes it's like, you know what? You need a higher level of care. You need maybe long-term inpatient, and that's my job as the clinician on site, is to kind of assess that and then work with the families. Ultimately, it comes down to the client, what he wants to do. I have clients that say, can you hold on to my clothes? I'm going out with my buddies. You know what I mean? And they're not interested in coming right back into recovery right now. And I have to respect that. And, sometimes the families ask me, because I'm on the phone. I call the families, call the families, let them know what's going on, and the families will say, what do we do now? And more often than not, I say nothing, don't do anything. Let him hit his bottom, we can't always be there to put a cushion under somebody's bottom.
That's true.
And usually when I get guys, I don't get guys first time around. These guys, the way addiction is, and with the epidemic with the pain pills, I mean, these guys have been in multiple treatment facilities before they come to me. And that's part of my screening process. This is your first time in sober living. Are you sure you're ready for this level of sober living? You know what I mean? But yeah, at the end of the day, we are a zero tolerance house. We don't allow a slip. We don't buy into it was just one night. And the reason is because, again, I have to think of the house as a whole. The house as a whole is going to come before any one individual. And if I let somebody have one slip or the 2-strike rule or the 3-strike rule, guess what? Everybody's going to be using 2 strikes and a foul tip. And then the sober living is not really sober living anymore, in which we can go into another, we could start thinking about treatment and, I know different treatment facilities, might have the flexibility to work with clients when they relapse. In a sober house, I don't believe I have that. I have to keep the integrity of the house.
That's right.
And, I worked at places that it was like that. And what it does is when you have one person, and maybe not be that into it, and he slips a few times, the other guys are like, and he's getting away with it, and he's doing all this, there's no consequences, screw it, I'm going out, and it can really get the whole house sick. So.
Yeah, it's not a good idea to let him slip. I get what you're saying there.
Absolutely.
Now, let's go ahead.
Oh,
sorry.
I'm sorry.
I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, so like I was saying, I have to realize most of these clients, they're not paying for their stay here. It's the families. And if, the family call me and say, Joe, what the heck's going on? What's his name? Relapsed and he's sharing a bedroom with my son? Like, what I mean? I absolutely would not allow that. Never allow that. And again, it's just part of the orientation, part of the screening process. When the clients come in, I make sure we're very transparent around all that stuff. I want everybody to know what the expectations are, what the policies are, whether it's relapse or medications or whatever, policies that we have in place. More often than not, we're working for the family just as much we are for the client, because sometimes the clients, it's not time for them to get better. And if we can help the family get better, and we can help guide them through the process, that helps out a lot, helping them to navigate through what to do, when's too much, when's too little. Again, that's like an art form. That's not something that you necessarily learn in school. No. That's something you learn from years of experience. I believe.
Oh, I believe so too. Now, Ian, feel free to chime in on this next question as well. But what has working with men in recovery like this closely shown you about having sustained sobriety? I mean, even beyond a sober home. If you want to start, Ian.
You, Ian.
Go ahead. You can start.
Okay, so basically, for my own sustained sobriety, working with guys at a level like this, is that what you were trying to talk? The question
exactly.
was. Okay, so basically, from the time I wake up, right, my natural instinct is to think about self, is to do, what I need to do, and take care of my stuff, and do this and do that, and I'm a drug addict. I'm an alcoholic, right? Mm-hmm. That's some weird reason that comes natural to me, is to think about myself and what I need to do, and and feed myself and all that stuff. So when I work intensively with alcoholics, and I probably at any given time have a caseload of about 30. I wake up in the morning and I check my phone and say, all right, who do I need to meet today? Do I have a one-on-one counseling session with this person? Oh, am I sponsoring this guy and we're set up for coffee? Am I hearing inventory at 9? Oh, this guy needs a letter for court, or this needs that. And basically, I get out of self. Again, like I was saying when we went back to the first question, less me, more you. It becomes less about me and more about others, how I can help them. It keeps me out of my own stuff. Now, that being said, I need to make sure I'm taking care of myself, that it's not this really sick, like, all right, I'm not going to take care of myself and I'm going to focus all my energy on you, like, I'm an alcoholic, how can I help you? I got to make sure that I'm doing what I need to do to take care of myself so I can be of service, so I can transmit a message to these guys, and as long as I'm doing that, we found that's a good prescription for alcoholism and drug addiction, intensive working with others. I don't always love, working with guys till 10 o'clock at night, but I think that's what I'm here for. And I think it keeps me sober too. You know what I mean? So there's a little bit of everything there. And I find great joy in doing it most of the time, Most of the time I find great joy in it. I love this stuff. And the first time I ever did this, the first time I ever was shown how to put the program together and apply these principles into my life and into work and all that stuff, was the first time I was able to put multiple years of sobriety together. Was the first time I was be able to develop a nice sober house. Was the first time I was able to become a clinician. You know what I mean? And I don't think there's any coincidence there. These were like the promises that they told me about, that if I followed this stuff closely, I would get similar results. And again, I have been reaping those results. So that's, basically what I try to transmit to these guys,
Mm-hmm. And Ian, you?
Me and Joe have known each other for a while, and me and Joe are very similar. Our beliefs in terms of recovery are very similar. I don't know if I've ever disagreed with anything he said. I look at this thing and I think, sober living has really stemmed out of therapeutic communities, and the therapeutic communities were a much harder line tougher approach. You come in, you have to shave your head, all sorts of stuff, scrubbing toilets with toothbrushes, and and extended care programs in sober living. Not all of them like to admit that that's really what they've stemmed from because of the reputation therapeutic communities have had. But as it's grown and as it's gotten into the sober living, there's sober living programs everywhere. It's really hard to find the reputable ones because, like what Joe was saying, there's York, Pennsylvania, for instance, has something like, I think, 120, if not more, sober houses in one town. Boca Raton, Florida is the same. Boston, Philadelphia, 3-4 guys in a bedroom. If you relapse, it's $50. That's it. Keep your stuff in your room. Just give us $50. The problem with a lot of this stuff is really how to approach people, and Joe's a couple times talked about an art, and with Albert, who's Northeast Addiction Consultants, our clinical consultant, I've talked to him a lot about it, and that this work is an art form. It's not something. I mean, people do go to school and then they get some letters behind their name, but that doesn't mean they're a good clinician. It doesn't mean that they don't have a big heart and they don't desperately want to help people. But this really is an art form, learning how to deal with this stuff and work through it with people. My experience is that a very clear approach with people, not only addicts and alcoholics, but family members as well. No, excuse my language, but no bullshit aside. Put that stuff on the back burner. Let's be very real. We're looking at an illness that 6% of the people who get sober make it 5 years. Most treatment centers, the statistics are diluted. They say 80% of interventions are successful, depending what your definition of successful is. 80% are successful getting them into treatment. Once they're in treatment, we're still looking at, 1 in 3 are going to relapse the day they get out. About 50% relapse the day they get out of treatment. 1 out of 30 stays for about a year. So that's the kind of stuff that the families need to know about. And that's the kind of stuff that the addict needs to know about. For like Joe's place, getting someone there who has struggled, getting someone there who has been in and out of programs, they need to get busy real quick with the work. If it's a kid who's been smoking some weed, I wouldn't recommend him to a place like Joe's. Why? Chances are, based on what I know about addiction, what I know about recovery rates and statistics, he's not going to stop anytime soon, So in that approach, working with the family is better. But the selflessness, it gets into another level where something that I look at often is, Joe's program is a 12-step based program, okay? My personal belief is that for long-term sobriety, the 12-step program or applying those principles is the most effective. Hands down. The problem I see is that 1 out of 10 people want to do 12 steps. And for families, there's Al-Anon, and maybe 1 out of 50 family members are interested in doing Al-Anon, which is the 12 steps for the family. So when you have a program that's based in selflessness, which is the 12 steps, but only 1 out of 10 people really want to do that, it's kind of like, well, what do you do, and that's where the work that I do with folks is really very honest. This is the deal. You're either going to do it or not. There is a program that I've been working with, Albert, our clinical consultant, he developed. It's modeled after the 12 steps. It's called symptoms displacement therapy. or symptom displacement counseling, SDC. And the idea is that it's a way to remove the ego and help the individual clear out the garbage from the inside and participate in a life of communion with the world that you live in, you know, being able to fit in society and be a part of. That's not, quote, 12-step based, and it doesn't have the stigma. I mean, to be quite honest, it really is taking those principles of the 12 steps and applying them in other areas and in other ways. Because as a society, we are here to help each other. You know, as a society, what we've been ingrained with, especially our generation, we're all about the same age. Our generation's been ingrained with the every man for himself. You know, look out for number one. Well, look at our country. Look at the state of the world we're in. You know, because we've all been looking out for number one. We're a mess. You know, we're falling apart. The drug epidemic is all based on looking out for number one. I need, I want, give it to me. Developmentally, when people start to use developmentally between the ages of 12 and 14, it's a very selfish time for somebody. They're trying to find their place in the world. Where do they belong? They're starting to realize that, and this is the really interesting thing for me, is they're starting to realize that they're not part of their parents, that they're separate from their parents. But developmentally, as the person uses, that developmental scheme stops. And Lisa last week talked about how we develop really up until we're 25 now, they see, the brain. So as developmentally people are using drugs, that all stops. So when the addict gets sober, they still are stuck in that selfish, self-centered mindset of a 12-year-old, 14-year-old. The 12-year-old and 14-year-old wants to be on their own, wants to be independent, yet is still very dependent on mom and dad. You know, and in one sentence they'll say, "Mom, I know. Mom, I got it. Mom, leave me alone." But then a half hour later, "Hey, Mom, can I have some money for my gas? I need to get to work." You know, and how many times, Joe, do you see guys come into your program 25 years old who fit that exact model to a T? You know,
absolutely.
So selfish, yet so, I can do this. I got this. I'm on my own. Hey, Mom, I need a grocery card so I can go shopping. You know, and in the real approach, you know, I don't want to call it a tough love approach. I don't want to call it like a hard ass or a mainline approach, but the real approach. This is what we're looking at. This is the reality of the situation. Maybe we could call it reality therapy, right? This is the reality of the situation. This is the statistics. What do you want to do with your life? You know, because I think when you're able to get an addict or an alcoholic on that plane of real, right? That's the important thing. I mean, these kids have been lied to for years. You know, everyone's telling them it's going to be okay. It's not going to be okay. You know, it's not going to be okay unless something changes. You know, going into a spin dry 28-day program and getting treatment, that's not treatment. You know, I think recently I wrote an article in our blog section about it. Like, that's not treatment. You know, rarely is a 28-day program able to actually apply treatment. You know, the treatment is an aftercare plan that usually gets thrown away in between the day the person leaves the rehab and gets to wherever they're going. You know, the treatment is the deep therapy that takes months to do with a counselor. The treatment is the working of the 12 steps. The treatment is that inner work of why we're using, what's going on, removing that garbage and becoming an effective member of society. You know, going to a 28-day program, it lets the mind clear. You know, it's a lot of didactic work where they give people information, teach them about the illness. So being real with the person, I think, is most important, and the family for that matter.
Okay. Joe, we actually got a question in for you here. They asked, what was the thing that happened that started the epiphany to recovery?
Okay. Well, today's a great day to talk about that. Like I said, I suffered for 10 plus years, in and out of treatments, living on the streets. I came from a really good family. Drug abuse and alcoholism really wasn't a big part of my family. And, but yet it was, it was running rampant in my life. And, again, I suffered for a lot of years and in and out of treatment. Sometimes I wanted to get better. Sometimes I just wanted to get off the street. Sometimes I just wanted to get back with my family. Sometimes I just wanted to stop hurting my family, whatever it was. And I had burnt out my resources in Boston at the time. After 9/11, I was checking myself into detox, 3 or 4 times a month. All right. And that was very common for me. Now, if you do that, over 2 years, Mass Health and Medicare, they're going to be like, enough is enough. And we started to see cutbacks after 9/11. And the cutbacks first went right to social services. And so I started to have conversations with counselors like, Joe, where are you going to go now? You've already been over here. You've already burnt that bridge. You've already done this, and I was starting to catch charges. I was starting to hang out and put myself in a lot more dangerous situations. So I had a counselor that said, why don't you check out this place out in Arizona? I went out to Arizona, wasn't invested in recovery. And like they say, I took myself with me. And, I relapsed when I was out in Arizona, and I started to get involved with criminal activity, selling of methamphetamines, identity theft, stuff like that. Put on probation. I was in and out of the famous Tent City jail with Sheriff Joe Arpaio, dressed up in pink garb and living out in an army tent in the middle of the desert. And what had happened was time just went by like that. I went out there to do a 6-month program, and I found myself stuck in the middle of Arizona on probation, couldn't leave the state, in and out of jails, and I've been there for 5 years and I haven't seen my family. And I couldn't get clean for the life of me. I couldn't. And what had happened was I kept getting arrested with more drugs on me. And, I went to the judge one day and I said, listen, you got me on probation, intensive probation, secret squirrel intensive probation. I said, let's look at the facts here. I can't even handle regular probation. You want to put me on this intensive probation with a probation officer and a surveillance officer? I said, I can't even do your normal check-in once a month. What makes you think I'm going to be able to act right, And I said, I was sitting in the jail cell in the county court, and I just said, you know what? It's probably easier for me to go to prison than it is to get clean. And so I went in front of the judge and I said, I'd like to revoke my probations. How much time do you guys want me to serve? Because, if I keep doing this probation thing, I'm going to be stuck here for 20 years, in and out, always on probation. Just send me to prison. I was so weathered at this time. I said, it's just easier for me to go to prison. So what happened when I was in prison? I lost 3 positive role models in my family. I lost my godfather first. I lost my father, and then I lost my grandfather, all within a short period of time. And I was sitting in a prison cell out in Arizona, and I really got to take a look at my life the way it was, and I had a moment of clarity, and I said, I've been chasing drugs and alcohol and the fast life and the selling and just that whole nightlife for a while, and it's really not giving me what I thought it was. What I wanted. Beautiful wives, tons of money, big car. All that BS. I didn't have it. I was sitting in a prison cell. And I just came to terms and said, this isn't what I want for my life, you know? And when I got out of prison, left to my own devices, I had no tools for living. I'm powerless. I went right back to that lifestyle because I'm powerless. You know, I don't have the power to just do the right thing. I don't have the power to stay sober. I don't have the power to be a good boy. You know, so I went back to that life. And you know, I did that for about a year. And that's when, you know, I heard about a group of people up in New Hampshire that just might be able to help me. And I really wasn't, you know, I wasn't buying into it too much, but another moment of clarity came and said, why not? You know, I've been in 50 plus rehabs. Why not give it a shot? And if, Mom, if this is going to make you okay, if you're going to stop crying, you know what? I'm done calling the shots. Just whatever you do, make sure you send me to a detox that gives me methadone, and then I'll go anywhere after that, you know? Because I don't like withdrawal symptoms, and I don't do the clonidine thing very well. So just give me my methadone for 6-7 days. I'll detox, and then wherever you want to send me, I'll go. And, you know, I went to a place, and that's when I had that experience just started, you know, because people were telling me the truth. People were using reality on me. And they said, you have these symptoms. If you do, you're one of us. And you know what? You're screwed because you're going to have those for the rest of your life. But if you want to recover, and if you think you can recover, right, and you want to, we'll show you how to. Not only that, we're going to show you how to recover and take these tools with you. And like what Ann was talking about, you know, treatment is good while you're in treatment. But what happens when I go back home? What happens when I move out of the sober house? What happens when I get discharged from primary care? You know? So we want to give you tools that you can take out with you, you know? That way, your sobriety is not contingent upon a counselor, a sponsor, a sober house, a treatment facility, or any type of location, you know? And that's what these people did for me, is they showed me that. And that's kind of basically how I wanted to develop the Skip Murphys, you know? So when guys, if they follow our prescription, which is very basic, I didn't make this stuff up, this is coming out of the big books, you know? They'll be able to carry this on to wherever they go, you know? And their sobriety won't be contingent upon me as a counselor, my house, or the guys in it, you know? They'll be able to take that on out and hopefully pass that on to other people that are suffering, and hopefully just watch this thing grow. So that's what happened was, you know, I took a look at my life when I was in prison, and I said, this is not giving me what I really wanted out of life. And it kind of motivated me to seek treatment. You know, it didn't happen right away. It was a good year when I got out of prison that I was out there running. But, you know, I wanted to be there for my mother. I wanted to be a good family guy. Deep down inside, that's not who I wanted. It was just kind of, I was in the grips of addiction, you know, and I would tell myself I was gangster. I would tell myself I was bad. I would tell myself I'm this, I'm that, and the other thing. I really wasn't. You know what I mean? I was just a country boy that, you know, grew up in the boondocks, and, you know, I just wanted to be a good guy. And again, I've always found myself powerless. And once I tapped into that power, is when I was like, you know what, I put my blinders on. I'm not turning back. You know what I mean? Because I'd done that many times before. And, you know, part of the amends process with my mother was like, don't sabotage your recovery, she said to me. You know? So when I wanted to move out of the sober house that I was in, and I wanted to move back to Boston, you know, she said, you know, you've done that before. You know? Where's that gotten us before? And so I said, you know what, I'll stay up here in Maine. You know? She said, whatever you're doing is working. Right. Don't alter it, you know? And that's just, I said, you know what, Mom? The first time, that was a part of my recovery. I said, you're absolutely right. I'm staying up here, and I'm going to continue on this path. And then I said, all right, so how do I make this work, you know? How do we serve the community? I'm out there sponsoring a bunch of people. I'm speaking at all these meetings. I'm going to school to become a counselor. You know, I bought a house. I got sober house guys. I said, let's just kind of like make this thing all come together. Let's take a little bit from this, a little bit from the 12 steps, a little bit from school, a little bit from the community, and kind of just bring this thing together. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. You know what I mean? I didn't know what I shouldn't be doing, and I started there. You know,
That's good.
as you can see, I animate when I talk about it, and I. It's
Oh, you're excited about recovery. I like that. Now, Joe, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. How can people get in contact with you if they need any further assistance?
I would say the easiest way to get in contact with me would type in Skip Murphy's Portland, Maine into any search engine, or Google Joe Riley, Portland, Maine. I'm pretty much all over the internet in one form or fashion. My telephone number is 774-269-4700. Email, my email's out there, jriley@skipmurphys. Skipmurphys.com is the website. Send me an email, give me a call. Whether you want to refer somebody to the house or just want to call and get some advice and just kind of run things by, I'll let you know my experience and maybe help guide you through that. There's a lot of families that call me, and there's a lot of clients that call me that it's not appropriate for them to come to my house, but I help place them in with a good fit because basically that's what we're here for. We're here to help people, you know, what's a good fit for you? What are your needs? Here, I know this guy over here, or maybe try these. Give this guy a call. Maybe that'll work out, you know? So.
Okay. And also, if you need help getting your loved one on the path to recovery, please call 1-800-723-1073 for a free consultation, or visit northeastaddictionconsultants.com. Ian, is there anything you'd like to say?
No, Joe, thanks for coming on. It's always good to talk to you. Good to see you.
And make sure you
Likewise.
tune in. Thank you. And make sure you tune in next week when we have Linda Stewart on. She's the owner of 11 Step House in Asheville, North Carolina. And from Northeast Addiction Consultants, we'd like to wish you a happy Father's Day and good luck on your journey through recovery.